This evening was no different from many others. I came home from work, tired and irritable after another long day. Difficult negotiations, problems with clients. All this was gradually wearing me down. But there was always Monica, my wife, waiting for me at home. We had been together for 7 years, and I thought we had built a strong marriage. I loved her, even if sometimes we were distant from each other because of everyday worries and problems. Monica was at home in the kitchen. I could hear music playing softly and the smell of something delicious. She always knew how to cheer me up. When I walked into the kitchen, she turned around and smiled at me like nothing had changed in all these years. "Hi," she said. "How was your day?" "Tired as a dog." I sat down at the table inside, but nothing special. She put a plate of something appetizing in front of me. I can't say I remembered the taste of the food at that moment. I was too tired to pay attention. We talked, as always, about little things. How her day had gone, her plans for the weekend. It was all routine, and it was this routine that seemed immutable to me. At night, I lay in bed next to her, listening to her quiet breathing. She had long since fallen asleep, but I couldn't find peace. My mind was spinning with thoughts of work, of tomorrow's meetings, of how tired I'd been over the last few months. But thoughts of her, of what she was like, kept popping up too. I never doubted her honesty, her loyalty. It seemed that if anything kept me afloat, it was our connection. The next morning, it was business as usual. I left for work, barely enough time to kiss her goodbye. Monica was always a little distracted in the morning, like her thoughts were somewhere far away, but I was used to it. Everyone has their own idiosyncrasies. The day passed in a series of meetings and phone calls. I completely forgot about home and Monica, immersed in work matters. Thomas, an old friend of mine, called me towards evening. He and I had been in touch since childhood and had been through a lot together. But in the last few years, we'd drifted apart. He had his family, I had mine, and we'd seen each other less and less often. "Hi, Rich," he said when I answered. "How you doing?" "Same as always, working," I grinned. "How are you?" "I'm fine, but I wanted to suggest we get together this weekend. It's been a long time since we've gotten together. Do you think it'll work out?" "Sounds good," I said. "I'd have to talk to Monica, but I don't think she'd mind." "Great, then we'll talk about it closer to the weekend." After talking to Thomas, I went back to my business, not even thinking about his offer. The thought of a meeting seemed pleasant, but somehow distant. All my attention was on my work, on the tasks that needed to be solved urgently. I returned home late, as usual. Monica again greeted me with dinner and a smile, but now, inadvertently, I began to notice her aloofness. I'd previously written it off as our busyness, our routine, but now it bothered me. There seemed to be something new in her gaze, in her gestures, something I hadn't noticed before, but I didn't pay much attention to it. Maybe she was tired too. After all, each of us has our own problems, our own worries, and it's not always possible to stay on the same page. We ate dinner in silence, and for the first time I thought about how far apart we had become. That night I couldn't sleep again for a long time. Monica slept peacefully beside me, and I lay staring at the ceiling, wondering what had gone wrong in the last few months. Could this just be temporary? Or were we really starting to lose each other? Over the weekend, we agreed to meet up with Thomas. Monica, as I suspected, didn't mind. She said she'd have her own things to do, so I figured it was all just another step to reconnect with friends and take my mind off my worries for a bit. We met Thomas at the bar just like old times. Beer, jokes, talking about life. It was business as usual. But Thomas looked a little agitated, as if he wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. "Did something happen?" I asked when I noticed his anxiety. He looked at me and sighed. "Rich, I didn't want to talk about it, but there's something you need to know." I looked at Thomas with bewilderment. His serious tone and tense expression contrasted sharply with the easy, relaxed atmosphere of the bar. I set my beer glass aside, feeling an uneasy feeling building up inside. "What do you mean?" I asked, trying to remain calm. This was an old friend of mine, and if he had decided to tell me something, then it must be really important. Thomas sighed and began to speak slowly, as if gathering his thoughts. "Look, Richard, I've been wondering for a long time if I should show you this." He was silent for a moment, then pulled out his phone and placed it on the table in front of me. I accidentally saw it a few days ago. I couldn't even believe my eyes at first, but then, I think you should know that. I still didn't know what he was talking about, but his words sent a chill down my spine. Thomas unlocked his phone and tapped the screen. The video he had prepared appeared in front of me. I felt my heart start to beat faster, but holding back my emotions, I pressed play. At first, I didn't understand anything. It was a dark club flooded with neon lights, and the crowd was buzzing to rhythmic music. The camera moved smoothly, as if the person filming was just passing by the scene. But then I noticed her. The figure of the woman in the spotlight, under the spotlight, moved gracefully, performing a pole dance. It took my breath away. This woman? It was Monica. My mind refused to accept what I was seeing. My wife, the same Monica I loved, the one I trusted without looking back, was working at a strip club. I watched her twist, bend, perform moves that seemed to leave no doubt of her professionalism. The seconds stretched like hours. I couldn't take my eyes off the screen, even though everything inside was clenching with pain and shame. 1,000 questions raced through my mind. How could this have happened? How long had it been going on? Why hadn't I noticed anything? And why had she never told me about it? When the video ended, I shut it down and set my phone aside on the table. It took me a few minutes to come to my senses. My head was empty, and in that moment I felt as if the whole world was crumbling around me. Thomas was silent, watching me. He realized that saying anything at this point would be unnecessary. I took a deep breath, trying to find the words, but instead I just asked, "Where did you get this?" Thomas looked at me a little embarrassed, as if he felt guilty for opening my eyes to the situation. I was there with my coworkers a few days ago. We were celebrating the closing of a deal and happened to be in that club. I never thought I'd see Monica there. He paused, choosing his words. I recognized her right away. I couldn't believe it. I took it off so that, I don't know, so you could see for yourself. I wanted to make sure I wasn't mistaken. I nodded, but I didn't really know how to react. My mind was telling me that it was true, that this video was proof that my wife was secretly doing something I never would have thought possible. But inside me, everything was protesting. I couldn't believe that Monica could be hiding something so serious. "Why is she doing this?" I asked, though the question was more rhetorical. Thomas shrugged his shoulders. "I don't know, Rich. It's her own business. But I think you should talk to her about it." Talk to her? The thought instantly sent me into a panic. How am I supposed to approach her and tell her I know her secret? How do I start such a conversation? There was no plan in my head. I just knew I couldn't go on living without finding out the truth. Thomas and I sat for a while longer, but the conversation wasn't going well. Both of us were tense, and I wanted to leave quickly. I didn't blame Thomas for showing me the video, though part of me wished he'd never found it. After all, if I hadn't found out, I would have continued to live in my bubble of happiness, believing in Monica's honesty and loyalty. When I got home, the clock showed past midnight. Monica was asleep, as she was most nights when I came in late. I stood in our bedroom doorway and stared at her in the darkness. Her face was so peaceful, so innocent. It was hard to believe she was hiding something so important from me. I left the room and sat in the kitchen, holding my head with my hands. Thousands of thoughts swirled around in my head, but none of them could bring me relief. I felt betrayed, confused, and cheated. But the worst part was that I couldn't find the strength to talk to her. I couldn't bring myself to admit that our marriage was a lie. The next morning I went to work again, trying to act normal. But every word she said, every gesture now seemed false to me. At some point, she noticed I was distant. "It's like you're not here," she said over breakfast. "Is everything okay?" I looked at her, trying to find any hint of a lie in her eyes, but I saw nothing. Monica looked the same as ever, the same woman I'd come to love. How could she play her role so calmly, knowing that she was hiding a lifetime from me? "It's okay," I lied, trying to hide my real feelings. "I was just tired." She accepted that explanation without hesitation, which made me feel even more like a stranger in our house. I didn't know how much longer I could take it. Every morning, every evening spent around her intensified my pain. I had to do something. Several days passed after I saw that video. With each passing hour, I could feel the chasm between Monica and I growing wider and wider. We were still living in the same house, sleeping in the same bed, but everything that had seemed familiar and natural before now seemed artificial, as if our lives were a play in which we were both playing our parts. I couldn't get what I was seeing out of my head. The video of Monica dancing on stage at the strip club became a constant picture before my eyes. Even at work, I couldn't concentrate. All business, all tasks took a back seat to thoughts of how and why my wife was hiding such an important part of her life. I tried to find an explanation. Perhaps she needed money? But we'd never had any financial problems. Maybe she was looking for some kind of emotional outlet? But then why couldn't she just talk to me? On the fourth day, I couldn't take it anymore. I realized that I could no longer pretend that nothing had happened. I felt cheated, betrayed, and that pain was growing stronger by the day. I needed to find out something. I needed to talk to her, even if it meant hearing things I didn't want to know. I got home earlier than usual. Monica didn't seem to be expecting me so early. She was sitting on the couch in the living room with a book in her hands, and when I walked in, her face tensed slightly. Maybe it was just my imagination, but I caught something wary in her gaze. "You're early today," she said, closing the book and setting it on the table. "Is everything okay?" I stood in the doorway, trying to stay calm, but inside I was seething. The words stuck in my throat. How do I tell her this? How do I start a conversation that could change everything? I took a deep breath and finally spoke. "We need to talk." Monica frowned, but she didn't show much excitement. Her face remained as calm as ever. She nodded and gestured for me to sit down next to her. "About what?" she asked when I sat down across from her. Her tone was calm, almost indifferent, and that only made me more anxious. "I know you work at a strip club," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Monica didn't immediately respond. She lowered her gaze for a moment, as if digesting what she'd heard, and then looked at me again, showing no sign of surprise or embarrassment. "So?" Her voice sounded as if I'd asked her something completely insignificant. That short, "so what?" gave me a shock. Was she really willing to accept this as something normal? As if her strip club job was something we'd always known about and had never been a secret. "Are you serious?" I asked, feeling the anger building up inside. "Are you saying that this is normal? That you consider it part of our lives?" Monica shrugged, her indifference hitting me harder than any words could. "It's just a job, Richard. I don't understand why you care so much." I couldn't believe my ears. A job? How can you call it work if she kept it from me? If all this time she'd been living a double life without saying a word to me? My anger was quickly replaced with a mixture of disappointment and hurt. "Why didn't you ever tell me about this?" I asked, trying to keep control of my emotions. She shrugged again, as if it really didn't matter. "You wouldn't have understood," she said. "You would never accept it normally. That's why I didn't speak up." Those words cut right through to my heart. You wouldn't understand. It was as if our whole life had been built on the fact that she didn't believe I would understand, that I could accept her decisions. I didn't know what to say. Every time I tried to find the words, they disappeared, giving way to a growing emptiness inside me. "So, what now?" she asked, looking at me calmly, as if this conversation was just another routine for her. I couldn't answer for a long time. All my ideas about our marriage had crumbled the moment I'd seen her in that video. But now that I heard her indifferent words, it was clear to me that she didn't see it as a problem. While I was suffering, agonizing, trying to figure out how it all went wrong, she remained completely indifferent. "How can you be so calm?" I couldn't take it anymore. "How can you talk about this so easily, like it doesn't mean anything?" Monica sighed, her face expressing slight irritation, as if she was tired of my lack of understanding. "Because it really doesn't matter as much as you think it does," she said. "It's just a job, Richard. I'm not doing anything wrong. I'm not cheating on you. I'm not betraying you. I'm just making money. You were always busy with your work, and I needed something to do too. Her words sounded like I was the one who should be apologizing, not her, as if everything that was happening was a normal part of our lives, and it was only me, with my limitations, who couldn't accept it. Why couldn't you just talk to me? I asked quietly, feeling everything inside burning with pain and resentment. Monica looked at me with an expression that was hard to decipher. It wasn't cold, but it wasn't warm either. It was more like something between indifference and fatigue. You'd be against it, she said finally. I knew it would cause conflict, so I decided not to speak. You wouldn't understand, and we'd just fight. And things were going well. The words, "things were going well," made me smile bitterly. Fine. For who? For her? It wasn't good for me. I could feel the misunderstanding growing between us. It wasn't just a secret. It was a whole part of her life that she'd kept from me. And now that it was out in the open, her indifference to my feelings struck me to the core. What do you want from me now? I asked. Do you expect me to just accept this and go on with my life as before? She shrugged. I don't know what you want to do, she replied calmly. It's your choice. I'm not going to change my life because of your worries. Her words sounded as if our relationship didn't matter to her anymore, like she'd made her decision long before I knew the truth. My head felt heavy with thoughts. It seemed like everything I knew about her was a lie. I rose from my seat, not knowing what to do next. I need to think, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, even though everything inside me was screaming. She only nodded, not trying to stop me, not showing any emotion. I walked out of the house, feeling everything inside me tearing apart. It felt like everything I loved, everything I believed in, had crumbled in an instant. After that conversation, I felt empty. I left the house at a complete loss. No thoughts, just a feeling of deep and abiding desolation. My feet led me to a park not far from our house. I sat down on a bench and looked at the people passing by, but their faces blended into one mass. Everything seemed detached, as if I were watching life from behind a glass, unable to participate in it. Monica was indifferent to our conversation, and that struck me the hardest. I was hoping for some kind of explanation, an excuse, even an argument. But her complete indifference made me question whether she had ever been attracted to me at all. I thought back to our years together, how we'd met, how we'd built our house, planned our future. It all seemed distant and perhaps not even real. My hands fell helplessly to my knees, and I closed my eyes, trying to come to my senses. But the more I tried, the more the pain inside grew. I tried to find logic in what she was saying. She was saying it was just a job, that I wouldn't understand. But could you hide something so important if there was to be trust in a marriage? She said, saw nothing wrong with it. But to me it was a betrayal, a blow to everything I thought was ours. How could I build a life on such a foundation of lies? It must have been over an hour as I sat in the park, immersed in my thoughts. Finally, I realized that I had to make a decision. I couldn't stay in this state of uncertainty any longer. But what next? Talking to Monica yielded nothing. She seemed to have made all the decisions for herself long ago and wasn't going to change. My only option was to accept her choice or leave. I didn't want to go home. It felt like this place wasn't mine anymore, even with all the memories that went with it. For the first time in a long time, I felt like a stranger in my own home, and the feeling wouldn't let go. I decided to call Thomas. It was times like these that I needed to talk to someone who could understand. Rich, are you okay? I heard a familiar voice after a few beeps. Shit, I admitted without further ado. It all came out. Thomas seemed to understand right away. His voice became more serious. Did you talk to her? Yes, I breathed out. She doesn't care, Tom. She just doesn't care. He was silent for a moment, and I heard him take a deep breath. I guess he was trying to find the right words to cheer me up, but I felt like nothing and no one could change my state of mind right now. Are you in town? Let's meet for a drink somewhere, he finally suggested. I didn't hesitate long. We agreed to meet at a bar, and half an hour later I was there. Thomas was sitting at a table in the corner when I walked in. He looked up at me and nodded, inviting me to sit down. Tell me about it. he began when I sat down across from him. I gave him a brief summary of the conversation I'd had with Monica, trying not to go into too much detail. I felt that repeating all her cold words only made the pain inside me worse. Thomas listened attentively, not interrupting. When I finished, he was silent for a long time. Then he said, "That's tough. I can't believe she's reacting so calmly to all this." He shook his head, clearly not understanding either. "I always thought you and Monica were something special." "I thought so too," I said bitterly. "But I guess I was wrong." Thomas sighed, leaning back in his chair. "What are you going to do?" I wondered. It was a question I'd been asking myself for the past few days, but I'd never found an answer. What could I do? Monica made it clear that she wasn't going to change anything. Staying with her, knowing about her double life and her indifference to my feelings, seemed unthinkable. But at the same time, the thought of breaking up with her made me fearful. I couldn't imagine life without her, even after everything that had happened. "I don't know," I said honestly. "I need time to think about it." Thomas nodded, realizing that there were no quick answers to such questions. We had a couple more drinks, but the conversation was no longer about Monica. We talked about work, about life, about what was going on around us. But deep down, I felt that it was all just an attempt to distract myself from the real problem that was hanging over me like a dark cloud. When I got home, Monica was already in bed. She didn't even ask where I'd been. Her indifference to my life continued to amaze me. I looked at her lying under the covers and felt like there was nothing more between us. There was no warmth, no intimacy, no feeling that had once bound us together. It wasn't a marriage, but a shadow of it. I lay down next to him, but sleep didn't come. We lay in the same bed, but we seemed like two strangers. I remembered our best moments, when we laughed together, when we made plans, when we talked about the future. It all seemed so far away now, as if it was in another life. The next morning, I left the house early again, trying to avoid talking to Monica. I needed to be alone to sort out my thoughts somehow. I took the day off work and just wandered around the city, trying to find answers to my questions. But the more I thought, the more difficult it became. I didn't know how to cope. My life was falling apart before my eyes, and I felt like there was nothing I could do to stop the process. All of my ideas about marriage, about trust, about love, were proving to be an illusion. But what to do now that this illusion was shattered? How do I move on, knowing that the person I trusted the most has turned out to be a stranger to me? I thought again about divorce. It seemed like the most logical solution. But even the thought of putting an end to our relationship made me fearful. We'd been together for so many years. Would it be so easy to take it all away? I couldn't stop thinking about it. I walked around the city center, went to cafes, sat on park benches, but I couldn't find an answer. I just didn't know what to do. Every time I tried to imagine a life without Monica, everything inside me clenched with pain. By late afternoon, I came home. Monica was in the kitchen making dinner. I stopped in the doorway, watching her. She moved calmly, unemotional, as if nothing had happened. As if our conversation a couple days ago had been something insignificant, not worth her attention. "How was your day?" she asked, not taking her eyes off the stove. "Fine," I answered mechanically, not knowing what else to say. We ate dinner in silence. Monica didn't ask questions, didn't try to talk to me about what had happened. Her indifference to our relationship struck me more and more, and it only reinforced my feeling that there was nothing more between us. When dinner was finished, I went upstairs, closing the bedroom door behind me. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring out the window, and suddenly realized one simple thing. Monica had made her decision a long time ago. She may have decided a long time ago that our relationship doesn't matter to her, and if I wanted to save any part of my life, I had to make my choice. A few weeks passed, but my condition remained virtually unchanged. I continued to live with Monica under the same roof as if nothing had happened. However, inside me there was a growing emptiness and a sense of meaninglessness in our existence together. We no longer talked about her work at the strip club, nor did we discuss the future as we had done before, Our conversations had been reduced to a simple exchange of everyday phrases that didn't touch on anything important. I felt like a ghost in my own home, a stranger on my own turf. Every morning I went to work, trying to focus on business, but my thoughts kept returning to what had happened. I tried to find a way to deal with the pain, but nothing worked. The pain of betrayal was with me every minute, every day. Monica, on the other hand, went on with her life as if nothing had happened, as if our marriage still existed as it was. Her indifference was destroying me slowly but surely. At some point, I realized that I couldn't stay like this any longer. I had to make a choice, either try to make things right or leave. But every time I thought about divorce, fear gripped me. It would mean the end of everything I had built with her. We'd been together for so many years, been through so much, and now I was supposed to admit that none of it mattered. One evening after work, I decided to meet up with Thomas again. I needed to talk to someone who could give advice, someone who could look at the situation from the outside. We met at the same bar where we'd had our last drink, but this time the conversation was even more somber. I told him about how Monica keeps acting like nothing is wrong and how it's weighing on me. I think she made a choice for herself a long time ago, I said, looking at the empty glass. She just doesn't care. Thomas shook his head thoughtfully, his face expressing sympathy. Do you really think she doesn't care about your relationship? He asked. I don't think so, I replied. I know she does. She told me to my face that she doesn't care about my worries. It's just a job to her and she doesn't see anything wrong with it. Then what are you going to do? Thomas asked, giving me a serious look. I sighed, realizing that the question had been unanswered for a long time. I don't know, Tom. I don't want to just pick up and leave. We've been together for so many years, but it's getting harder every day. Her indifference is killing me. Thomas was silent for a long moment, pondering my words, then leaned forward. Rich, sometimes you just have to let go. If you feel like there's nothing left, then maybe that's the end of it. Those words hung in the air. I realized that I had been thinking about this for a long time, but there was no way I could admit it. The thought of it being the end was frightening to the point of pain. It felt like my life would crumble if I admitted it. But Thomas was right. My life with Monica wasn't what it used to be. I came home later than usual. Monica was sitting on the couch, watching TV. Her face was relaxed, as if the whole world around her remained as plain and simple as it was. How could she be so calm when everything was crashing inside of me? I slowly walked over to her, trying to control my emotions, even though everything inside was screaming. Sitting down next to her, I grabbed the remote and turned off the TV. She turned her head toward me, a shadow of surprise in her eyes. We need to talk, I said, feeling a lump rise in my throat. Monica nodded, clearly expecting a follow-up, but still not expressing any excitement. I've been thinking about what happened for a long time, I began, trying to choose my words. I tried to understand you, tried to find a way to deal with it, but I couldn't. Your indifference, it's killing me, Monica. She frowned slightly, but didn't say anything. You say it's just a job, something I couldn't possibly understand. Maybe you're right, but it's more than that. The point is that you've been hiding it from me. You've been living a double life, and now that it's out in the open, you act like it means nothing. It means everything to me. Monica sat silent, her face impenetrable. I can't live like this anymore, I continued, feeling my voice begin to tremble. I can't be with a man who doesn't care about our relationship, about how I feel. She nodded slowly, as if those words were something she expected. What are you suggesting? She asked in an even tone. Her question stunned me. It was as if she really didn't see any problem. Like this was nothing more than another routine to get through. I closed my eyes, trying to deal with my emotions. I think we should break up, I finally said, and the words cut the air apart. Monica looked at me with the same expression of calm indifference. She didn't ask any questions, didn't try to object, didn't show a single emotion. It was like the final blow. Okay? She said after a brief pause. And that okay destroyed me. I stared at her, trying to understand how she could be so calm. How could she let go of everything we had so easily? but apparently it hadn't mattered to her for a long time. She had made that decision long before I voiced it. I rose from the couch, feeling my legs shake beneath me. I didn't know what to do next, how to pack my things, how to say goodbye to something that had been a part of my life for so many years. It all seemed impossible. I walked to my bedroom, sat on my bed, and sat in silence for a long time, staring at one point. I thought about what would happen next, about how I would live without her. But the worst part was the realization that she never had the same feelings for me that I had for her. I was just a part of her life, a convenient part that she could easily leave behind. I couldn't believe this was the end, but everything inside was screaming that it was. It's hard to explain why, but the more time passed, the deeper I sank into my own pain. Every morning I woke up with the feeling that everything that was happening was some kind of horrible dream, and that something was about to change. But nothing did. Monica continued to live her life as if nothing had happened, and I was drowning in this void, unable to get out. I tried to focus on work, but my thoughts kept coming back to one thing. How could she do this? To me, her secret work at the strip club was tantamount to cheating. Yes, she may not have dated other men, but the fact that she kept it from me, that she could undress in front of others, was a betrayal. Her body, her actions all became foreign, and I could no longer look at her the way I used to. My wife, my friend, my partner. It all disappeared the moment I learned the truth. I often thought back to the night Thomas sent me the video. I kept seeing that image in front of me. Monica on stage, surrounded by a crowd of strangers. Every time I thought about it, my insides clenched. It felt like I'd lost not only her, but myself. It was as if my life had been divided into two parts, before and after. Monica remained as calm and indifferent as ever. We didn't discuss what had happened anymore. I didn't know if she felt any guilt or remorse, but her silence was eloquent enough for me, like none of it mattered to her. Or maybe it really didn't. I saw no regret or pain in her eyes. She went on with her life as if nothing had changed, and I couldn't stop thinking about the fact that we were gone. Every night I lay in our bed, listening to her steady breathing next to me, and I couldn't sleep. We were lying next to each other, but there was a gap between us. A gap I couldn't bridge. I tried to make myself understand her, to forgive her, but nothing worked. Instead, the feeling grew inside me that I had become a stranger in my own home, a stranger in my own life. One night, when I couldn't sleep again, I quietly left the bedroom and made my way to the living room. There, in the semi-darkness, I sat on the couch for a long time, staring into the void. I felt that I couldn't stand it any longer, but I didn't know what to do. I tried to contact Thomas, but even that seemed pointless. What could he tell me? That things would get better? But how could that be possible if there was nothing left? At times like this, I felt despair. I began to think that I would never recover from this pain again, that it would become a part of me that I would carry with me for the rest of my life. I was crushed not only by Monica's act, but also by her indifference. That indifference was killing me slowly, but surely. In her eyes, I no longer existed as a person, as a husband. She no longer took me seriously, and this feeling made it all the more unbearable. A few days after we talked about divorce, I tried to talk to her again. I wanted to understand what she thought about all this, whether we had any chance of saving the relationship. But her reaction was the same as always: calm, cold, and indifferent. Monica, I began, trying to hold back my excitement. We need to have a serious talk. She looked up at me, as if surprised that I was still trying to figure something out. What else is there to talk about, Richard? She asked, sighing. You've already said everything. No, I haven't said everything. I could feel the desperation building inside me. I want to understand why you did what you did. Why you kept it from me. How long have you been living this double life? She shrugged silently, as if it were an unimportant question. It's just a job, she answered, as if that could explain anything. Just a job? I couldn't believe my ears. You think it's just a job? Do you realize what it looks like to me? Do you realize it's not just a job to me, but a betrayal? Monica only shook her head. clearly not intending to delve further into the subject. There wasn't an ounce of regret in her eyes. She didn't try to justify herself, didn't try to explain her actions. Her indifference drove me deeper into a corner with each word. "Don't you realize what this is like for me?" I continued, almost unable to contain my emotions. "You ruined everything we had. You think I can just let it go? It's treason to me, Monica. You betrayed me." She listened to my words, but her face didn't change. "I didn't do anything to make you feel betrayed," she said finally. "I've always been honest with you, except for one moment. And I don't think that's a reason to ruin everything." "You've always been honest?" I was almost shouting. "You kept it from me that you worked at a strip club. Did you think I'd never find out? It's not just a little secret. It's a huge lie you've been building up for years. How can you not see that?" She slowly got up from the couch, as if she was bored with this conversation. "I don't see the point in continuing this, Richard." Her voice was firm but not harsh. "If you can't accept that it was my job, and you continue to see it as cheating, then maybe we really should split up." Her words hung in the air. I fell silent, feeling all my strength leave me. She hadn't tried to fight for us. She didn't see the point of our relationship, and I stood in front of her, completely broken, and realized I couldn't go on any longer. I slumped down in my chair, feeling the ground go from under my feet. It was over. The end of everything I had built for so many years. Our shared memories, our home, our plans. All of it was destroyed by her indifference. She retired to her bedroom without another word, leaving me alone. I spent the rest of the night in the living room, unable to move. My head was buzzing with thoughts, with pain. I tried to figure out what had happened to us, how we'd gotten to this point. But the answers never came. Morning came, and I realized I couldn't stay in this house any longer. I gathered the things I needed and headed out the door. Standing on the threshold, I looked back at our house one last time, and in that moment, a wave of despair came over me. Everything I loved was still there, inside, and I couldn't go back. I left without leaving her a note, without saying goodbye. I didn't know where I was going, and I didn't know what would happen next. I just knew I could no longer stay where I had been betrayed. For the past few weeks, I had been living in complete apathy. Every day stretched like an eternity, and every day I felt worse. I tried to focus on work. I tried to see Thomas. Sometimes I even forced myself to go outside and pretend I had everything under control. But it was just an act. In reality, there was an emptiness inside me that nothing could fill. I felt destroyed, like I had been robbed of a part of myself. The whole time I was in this state, Monica continued to live her life. She didn't try to contact me. She didn't ask how I was, and it drove me crazy. How could she let everything go so easily? How could she continue her work as if nothing had changed? Her indifference didn't just hurt anymore. It became the very needle that was taking me down with each passing day. One night, after a long and restless day, I decided to get drunk. I felt that alcohol was the only thing that would dull my pain, that would allow me to forget for a few hours what had happened. I took a bottle of whiskey, sat down in the living room, and started drinking. One shot after another went down easily, and with each new one I sank deeper into my thoughts. At first I could just feel the tension starting to let go. My head was spinning. My thoughts were becoming more and more fuzzy. But instead of relief, I felt a growing anger. Anger at myself for not seeing the truth sooner, and anger at Monica for betraying me. At that moment, the alcohol didn't calm me down, but only intensified all the negative emotions I had been trying so hard to suppress for the past weeks. I didn't know how much time had passed, but at some point I had the crazy idea to go to Monica's workplace. I needed to see it for myself, to see what she was doing, and how she could be so indifferent to what had ruined our relationship. I grabbed my car keys, and despite my foggy state, got behind the wheel. On the way to the strip club where Monica worked, the same questions kept running through my head. Why did she choose this? Why did she choose to hide her job from me like it was something shameful? Why was she willing to ruin everything for this? I knew I wouldn't find the answers, but the desire to see her there at the club was stronger than common sense. When I pulled up to the club, my head was buzzing with alcohol, but I was still able to think clearly enough to realize what I needed. I got out of the car and headed toward the entrance. A brightly lit stage opened up in front of me, with loud music and dimmed lights in the audience. Everyone around me seemed foreign to me, but I couldn't take my eyes off the stage where Monica was performing. She was dancing on the stage surrounded by lights that emphasized her every smooth and seductive gesture. She was wearing a revealing dress that emphasized her figure, and every man in the audience kept his eyes on her. I felt everything boiling up inside me. These men were looking at her with lust, the way I had once looked at her. But now I was unable to look at her with the same eyes. Not my wife stood before me, but a stranger who had chosen this path over being with me. Monica moved confidently, smoothly, as if her every move had been thought out to the smallest detail. She was used to the attention, used to being at the center of this darkly erotic show. She didn't care about the stares of these men, their greedy eyes. She knew she controlled them, and it was evident in her every move. But for me, that dance of hers was the last straw. I couldn't contain my anger. From the moment I saw her on stage, something inside me clicked. Everything I'd been trying to suppress, all my fears and resentments came out. How could she do that? How could she stand on that stage and let strange men look at her like that? All I felt at that moment was a wild sense of injustice and betrayal. It was eating me up to realize that this woman who had once been my wife was willingly putting herself on display in front of others, as if I had never mattered to her. Monica didn't notice me in the crowd, continuing her dance, immersed in the rhythm of the music and illuminated by the many glowing lights. But I couldn't look at it anymore. I rose from my seat and, clenching my fists, headed for the exit. I couldn't be in that place anymore, couldn't watch her continue to destroy all my memories of our marriage. Outside, I felt the ground go from under my feet. The air was fresh, but I hardly noticed it. Everything inside me was boiling. My heart was beating so hard it felt like it was about to jump out of my chest. I sat down on the curb and tried to calm down, but it was impossible. The image of Monica on stage haunted me, making my anger and frustration grow with renewed vigor. I spent a few minutes just sitting there, trying to come to my senses. But the more I tried to calm down, the stronger the wave of hatred rolled in. I couldn't believe this was all happening to me, that my wife, whom I loved and trusted, could have so degraded our marriage. How could she choose a life where she was only an object for other people's gaze and not my companion? Everything inside me clenched with rage and pain. This feeling did not let go. On the contrary, intensified with each passing minute. I felt powerless, crushed. I tried to fight it, tried to convince myself that it was just a job like she said, but I couldn't. I couldn't bring myself to accept it. After driving through town, I made my way back home, but home no longer seemed like the place where I could find solace. I made my way to the bedroom, still furious at what I'd seen. I opened the closet and started throwing her things around the room, not knowing what else to do with this pain. Everything that belonged to her seemed foreign to me now, unnecessary. Everything that used to be a source of joy and warmth for me now only caused me pain. I could no longer see her, the Monica I loved, in these things. I saw only betrayal and lies. When I finally exhausted myself and sat down on the bed, a wave of fatigue came over me. I felt my strength leave me, and all that was left inside was emptiness. All I could do now was relive that moment over and over again, knowing that I couldn't change anything. It had been weeks since the night I'd seen Monica on stage. I hadn't been back to the club or tried to contact her since then, but her image never left me. Whenever I closed my eyes, that scene came back to me, her dancing in front of a crowd of eager eyes, and her indifference, her total detachment. That indifference became the symbol of all that had been broken between us. No force could bring me back to my old life. Monica, her job, our relationship, all of that was in the past, but at the same time I couldn't move on. Life had lost its meaning. Every morning I woke up feeling empty and meaningless. I didn't want to go to work anymore. I didn't want to socialize with my friends. I didn't want anything. Even Thomas, who had been there for me the whole time, started to notice that I was going deeper and deeper into myself. He offered several times to meet up, to have a drink, to distract me, but I knew it wouldn't change anything. No words, no exhortation could help me cope with what had happened. I was broken, completely. From the day I'd first seen Monica on stage, my entire existence had been an endless series of meaningless days. I tried to forget myself in alcohol, but it only gave me temporary relief. Every time the effects of alcohol passed, reality returned with a new force, like a blow to the chest. I could no longer find peace in anything. I spent my days sitting at home in the dark, not turning on the lights or answering the phone. Thomas called me several times, but I didn't pick up. Deep down, I knew he wanted to help, but I no longer believed that anyone could pull me out of this state. This was more than just grief. It was a loss of self. One night, as I sat on the living room floor again, surrounded by bottles, a sudden realization came to me. I couldn't live like this anymore. I couldn't continue to be a prisoner of my feelings. This pain, this betrayal, it had all become a part of me, eating me up from the inside out. But I didn't know how to deal with it. I couldn't find a way out. Every time I tried to force myself to think about the future, I saw her face in front of me. The face of a woman who was no longer with me, but who had left an indelible mark on my soul. I remembered our happy moments with Monica. Memories surfaced before my eyes like ghostly images. How we laughed together, how we walked the streets of the city, how we spent evenings cuddled on the couch. At that time, it seemed that nothing could separate us, that our love was stronger than any trials. But now it all seemed distant, as if it had happened in another life. And in a way it was. I could no longer see these moments as part of my reality. They had become ghosts of the past that I would never get back, but at the same time I couldn't let go of those memories. They clung to me like anchors, preventing me from moving forward. I realized I couldn't forgive Monica, no matter how hard I tried. Her betrayal, her indifference, had left a mark too deep for me to erase, and that realization only made it worse. I kept drinking, hoping that alcohol would somehow help me forget, but it was useless. Everything inside was empty. All my attempts to dull the pain were in vain. I was living, but it was an existence on automatic. I no longer felt anything but this all-consuming emptiness. After a while, I decided to see Thomas. He insisted on seeing me, and I couldn't refuse anymore. We sat at the bar and he tried to make conversation, but I couldn't get a word out of my mouth. Thomas realized that I was still deeply depressed and suggested that I see a psychologist, but I didn't want to listen. I had given up believing that anyone could help me. "Richard, you can't go on like this," he said, trying to get through to me. "I can see how you're torturing yourself. You need to do something about it. Talk to someone. Find a way out. You can't just sit in your apartment and watch life pass you by." His words were logical, but I didn't feel strong enough to follow his advice. I felt like no way out was going to help. Everything I had was gone the moment I learned the truth about Monica. How could I start a new life after that? After my meeting with Thomas, I returned home and sank back into my thoughts. I realized that I was on the brink. Everything that had happened had crushed me. I tried to go on living, but every day was a new torture for me. I couldn't bear it any longer, but I didn't know how to change it. That night I took up drinking again. I drank more than I ever had before, trying to drown out everything inside me that was tormenting me. At one point, I lost track of time. I just sat on the floor, staring at one point, and I couldn't shake the thought that this wasn't going to end, that I would forever be trapped in this place. A few hours passed, and I realized that I was at rock bottom. I no longer saw the point in continuing. My life, my relationships, everything I had built for so many years was shattered, and I could no longer deal with the pain. I felt like I had already crossed that line beyond which there was no going back. I thought about Monica, about how things could have been different if she hadn't made that choice, if she'd just told me the truth, if she'd been honest with me. But now those thoughts seemed pointless. Everything was already ruined, and I couldn't see a way back. The last drops of alcohol no longer brought relief. The room was quiet, but that silence pressed down on me like a weight I couldn't shake off. I realized that I couldn't go on living like this. Everything inside me was screaming for one thing. I couldn't forgive her, and it was destroying me. That night was the last straw for me. I realized I couldn't fight it anymore. I had made a choice, and that choice was to stop torturing myself. Deep down, I knew I could never forget her betrayal. Never would I be able to deal with that pain. Sitting in the dark, I made my decision.